Hey guys, happy holidays, everybody. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys something a little bit different. As you can see, instead of doing my normal design videos with the diagrams and the design analysis of, a specific fight in Final Fantasy XIV, because the last few times I streamed, I ended up talking about recruiting or otherwise raid leading activities. I figured that a presentation style video, as you can see, would be a good opportunity to discuss what it's like to be a raid lead and to share what I've learned over the past few years about what it means to be an effective raid lead in particular, right? So, and I hope this will be useful to you guys because on Reddit I see people posting, they say, oh, I'm anxious to get into raiding for the first time. I'm anxious to get into raid leading for the first time. And that anxiety is totally understandable, right? Most people who are raiding or raid leading for the first time, they're probably pretty young. They're probably just out of college. They might be in college or not even in college yet, and they don't have leadership experience, right? And leading 8 people is a pretty daunting task for the first time, so it's not easy. So I chose 5 tips and tricks to help first-time raid leads to get acclimated to the role. And I'm going to try to keep it a bit short. I'm not going to go into any one tip too in depth because I can talk about this forever. So I'm going to go over it a bit broadly. But yeah, so let's try to get into it. So first, about myself. I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV since October 2016, so about 3 years now. I've been raiding since Creator, which was also about 3 years ago. And I've been raid leading since UCOB, which was about 2 years ago. So I've been leading for about 2 years, and in that time, I've been raid leading hardcore groups. So these are groups that raid for 5 hours plus a day for progression. We aim to clear content as fast as possible. But the tips that I'm going to give should be applicable to pretty much any raid group. So if you are leading a hardcore group, if you're raid leading a casual group, it doesn't really matter. These tips should be helpful to you about creating a good raid environment. So let's keep going. Let's get into the real content. So tip 1, establish goals. This is a really important tip. This is the most important tip, but luckily people seem to do this pretty often. So establishing your goals. So this can be anything, and I'll give an example of what my team does. My team's goals, for example, are to clear Savage in the first few days. In the past, for example, Sigmascape, over a year ago, our goal was to clear Savage in the first week. But your goal doesn't have to be clearing Savage in a certain amount of time. Your goal could be something like, our goal is to get everybody all the primal mounts by the end of the expansion, right? But it doesn't really matter what it is, but you need to have a goal. And the reason why you want to have a goal is that it informs your decisions. So for example, if my group is recruiting somebody, the type of person we're recruiting for the group is completely informed by our goals. If we are trying to clear very fast, we need a very particular player to fit into our team. If we don't care about how fast we clear, then the skill level, like the bar that we're looking for, isn't as high, right? So that's just a very quick example of how goals might inform your decisions. But even like your day-to-day small decisions of how many hours are we raiding? Like, can we cancel this raid? Like, do we need to do prep for the next raid? Like, that's all informed by your goals. And I said the goals can be anything, but as you can see, there's a little asterisk here. So let me go here. I have a warning, and that's be careful with having fun as your goal. So the reason why I am really wary of this goal is that everybody plays this game to have fun. So this goal is somewhat meaningless. And to give that more detail, everybody plays to have fun, as I said, right? So, but we all define fun differently. So my example or my definition of fun, when I say I want to have fun, that means I want to clear content quickly. But when you want to have fun, you might want to clear content at like a medium pace. You might want to just play for 3 hours a day with your friends and not really worry about the stress of clearing the content, right? Those are very different definitions of fun. And if we were in the same group, one person would be having fun and the other person wouldn't be, probably. But with this goal, it's like very vague. So what you want to do with these goals is you want to say like, have fun by doing X, right? Like you can say, we want to have fun by clearing Savage in 3 weeks. And that way you have a very clear definition of what it means to have fun. And when you're recruiting people or there are disputes that happen, you can point back to goal and be like, there's a very specific definition for this goal, and this is how we're going to resolve the dispute. So that's my warning. Oh, okay, wait, sorry. Let me go back for a second. And so the goals here, 2 more things I want to say about them is that the first is that you want to express your goals clearly. And since most groups do have goals, the issue is that they're not really properly expressed to the raid members, right? Like in recruitment, you might say like we are a casual group, we are a mid-core group. You might even say like we are aiming to clear before the next patch. That is very common, but sometimes that goal isn't actually expressed to the members in the group. Sometimes the members in the group don't really hear about that, and then they're in the group and then they have a different idea of what the goal is. They might think that you're trying to clear faster than your recruitment post says, and then when they see the recruitment post, they might get surprised, for example. So you want to express it clearly to make sure your whole group knows. And the second point I wanted to make is that when you make these goals, you want them to be a combination of your players' personal goals. So let's say you get your 8 people together and then you finish a raid tier and you don't know what you're doing for the next ultimate. Well, you want to get together as a group and be like, well, what is everybody's goals for these ultimate? Like, can we stay together as a group? Can we establish a group goal that satisfies and helps out each person's personal goals? And that's kind of the way it works, right? Your players' personal goals feed into the group goals, and then the group goals should both help the players achieve their personal goals, and they should inform recruitment to recruit players whose personal goals align with your group's goals. I just said goals a bunch of times, but hopefully that made sense. Basically, players' goals and group goals, it's a cycle. They should feed into each other in a positive feedback loop. So that's goals. That's the first tip. Luckily, a lot of people do this, but I really thought it was important to call out because not having established goals makes everything fall apart. So it's very important. All right. Let us move on. Tip number 2, open communication. This tip is so important. I cannot stress how important this is. And yes, it is tip number 2. Yes, it is not as important as having goals. However, for some reason, people do not think about this tip. And therefore, I stress it even more, right? Like goals, like I said, people do it. Even if they don't do it perfectly, it's on their mind. This is something that people don't even think about at all. And therefore, I cannot stress how important it is to always keep this on your mind. And the reason why that is that it helps you resolve conflict. And let me give a quick example. So let's say there's a small conflict between just 2 raid members A and B, right? Like raid member A is a little bit unhappy with raid member B. Perhaps raid member B said something that ticked off raid member A, or it like constantly has this habit of saying something that ticks him off, right? And raid member A doesn't say anything. It's not a big deal. And then as time goes on, it just builds. That resentment, it just builds and builds. And they don't feel comfortable like expressing that resentment, so it just keeps building and building, and they keep suppressing it. They suppress, but it builds, and they suppress, but it builds, and they keep trying to push it down. It's like a garbage can where you're trying to shove all the garbage in before you take the bag out and finally throw the garbage out. And then finally it just explodes, right? Like you cannot fit in anymore. You cannot crush it in anymore. And this resentment just pops out, and then it creates this huge conflict that's like way bigger than if you had just resolved in the first place. And like the person explodes, your group might explode. It's just not a good time. But if you have this environment of open communication where people feel comfortable expressing their misgrievances, they might say like, oh, person like raid member B says that thing that ticks off raid member A, and raid member A feels comfortable enough to say like, hey, can you not say that? You know, that really bothers me. And then you can resolve it at the time. It's much less likely to blow up, and you can resolve conflict together. And as the raid lead, it's your responsibility to create an environment where raid member A feels comfortable to say something, right? You don't want to say something. You don't want to be like, oh well, raid members should just say what they think, right? Like that's not realistic. Realistically, you can play a very big part in creating an environment where people feel comfortable to authentically express themselves, right? So how do you do that? And really, this tip requires its own video. It's so big. This topic is so big. Having good communication is so difficult. It's so hard, and you won't do it right the first time. Even I still struggle with this. It's been 2 years since I've been thinking about it. It's just very difficult. So if there's interest, I feel like I can make a whole video on this in particular. But for the sake of time, I'll just give you one piece of actionable advice, and that is to lead by example. So for example, let's say you're having a trial, right? You trial somebody and the most of your group thinks that person's not very good, right? They say like, oh, they messed up XY mechanic. I don't really want them in the group. What you want to do in this situation is you want to say, does anybody have differing opinions? Does anybody have something else to say? Does anybody have anything in support of this person? And it's really important to call out like this idea of asking for differing opinions, because otherwise people who have differing opinions might, you know, they see the majority opinion is not their opinion. So they just feel like, oh, I don't want to go against the majority. I'll just stay quiet. I'll just not say anything. But you really want to foster this environment where people can say what they want to say. So by asking for their opinion, they're more likely to be like, oh, actually, I'm being asked for this. Maybe I'll just offer my opinion. And to even go a step further, you might say like, okay, well, I hear that everybody didn't like this trial. Did anybody like this trial? I like the trial for XY reason. You shouldn't lie here. You should come up with a real reason why you like the trial. But by offering your opinion first, other people might be like, oh, it's not so scary to go against the majority. I can also go against the majority. And that way you can foster a better conversation around the raid member rather than just, somebody says something, the majority piles on that opinion, and then you just go with that opinion without hearing the other side first. That's just one example of how to do it. As I said, this topic is very, 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 very big, but we don't have time for that. I still have 3 more tips to get through. So please, in the comments, if you're interested in this, I'm more than willing to do it. Moving on. Tip number 3, get feedback. So this one's really important, and this one actually ties into tip 2, which might be a little bit of a recurring theme. You want to get good feedback to expose your blind spots. So as a raid lead, you're going to have blind spots. You're not going to notice when things are happening. You're not going to notice when there's issues. You're not going to notice when you make a mistake. That's normal. Nobody is perfect, and nobody will notice every mistake they make, right? You might think something's good, you might think something's working, but in reality, most of your raid members might not be happy with it. If you get feedback from your raid members, then if you get regular feedback for their raid members, they will feel like they have a channel to tell you like, oh, hey, I didn't really like that thing you did. They'll feel like they have a regular channel to give you negative feedback, things to improve on, without, you feeling accused, right? Like, normally, if they don't have that channel, they feel like they won't be able to tell you that you did something poorly, because it's kind of weird to, it's kind of weird to go up to your friend and be like, hey, I really hate that you do that thing. Like, I'm going to give you some feedback now. Like, that's a little bit strange. But if you open up that channel, you're the one asking for it, they're gonna respond in kind and tell you what's on their mind. And of course, you need an open environment, tip number 2, where they feel comfortable expressing that feedback to you. And I would say a tip here is to maintain a good cadence for feedback. What I like to do is after every raid tier, say after we clear Savage, I give it a week or 2, let my team celebrate. We cleared the fight, just have some good vibes, and then I go into people and I message people's DMs. I message them. I'd say, oh, what did you think of the tier? What did we do wrong? What would you like to see different we do in next tier? Like, would you like to see us like change how we prep? Would you like to see us change like how we did 16-hour days? Like that kind of thing, right? I really want to hear all their feedback. And normally, like 9 times out of 10, the person will be say like, yeah, it was good. Yeah, I don't have any feedback. And that's totally normal. Even if you foster a good environment of communication, they're just not going to get feedback. People don't practice giving feedback. Giving good feedback and thinking about feedback is a skill. It's something you have to practice, so they just don't really think about it. But some members will give you feedback, and you should really, really value what they tell you. You should really think about it, sit on it. Don't be defensive. Don't be like, well, the reason we did it is that, so like I'm not going to listen to you. You really want to make them feel heard, sit on their feedback, and like really think about what you can do to improve in those areas. Because even if you don't directly agree with them, there's something there that you can probably improve on. And finally, as a note, there's a chance that they actually might ask you for feedback too. This happens to me every so often, where I asked a raid member for feedback, and that raid member says like, oh, you're asking how of a raid lead you are. I want to know how good of a raid member I am. And then you have to give them feedback. And like I said, this is a skill, and this again deserves its own topic, right? Like I said, feedback is an important skill, and I don't want to go into all the little details about giving good feedback now. But 2 quick tips. One is give as much positive feedback as you give negative feedback, if not more. When people say feedback, they usually think, oh, negative feedback, things to improve on. But really calling out good things people do is really important. And like that serves as a positive feedback loop for them to keep doing those things again and again. The other tip is to not be accusatory. When you give negative feedback, you do not want to say, you did this thing. Why did you do this thing? That thing was so stupid. That is not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to say, I noticed this thing happened. Oh, what went wrong here? You're like questioning, right? You want to know, like, understand more about the situation. And then when you feel like you have a full grasp of the situation, you say like, oh, I think it would have been better if we did this. Let's, like, you want to have this in like this mindset of let's work together to tackle this problem. It's not me versus you. It's me and you together to solve this problem. And that way they won't get defensive or anything. They'll feel like you're supporting them, and then you can work together to solve issues and come out as better raid members as a result. So very quick advice without going too into it. But yeah, make sure you get feedback. All right, on to tip number 4. Understand the role. Okay, so this one's a little bit of a weird one because, you might not really think about it that much, but I think it's really important to understand what it means to be a raid lead. So I see raid leads fairly often make a mistake in one of two ways. They'll either be very hands-off. They'll say, oh, I'll do the scheduling and I won't really do anything else. Like, whether or not we do prep, whether or not we trial people soon is like, I'm very hands off. Maybe I'll try to schedule something once a week and it'll just get done. It will get done, they'll say, and they won't really do anything. And then eventually it doesn't get done and the group falls apart. That's common. The other way is the other mistake they make is the opposite, where they say, I need to do everything. Like, I need to find all the trials. I need to schedule all the trials and communicate with them. I need to find all of our crafters. I need to find a ninth man. I need to set up the Discord. I need to set up a schedule. I need to raid shot call in game. Like, I need to do everything. And then by doing that, they're just so overloaded with responsibilities that they crash. They burn out. And then they just like, I can't raid lead it anymore. So I just quit. Like, that happens too. And riding that line is a little difficult. Obviously, I presented two extremes, and logically, you want to be in the middle, right? And what I really want to stress here is that it is your responsibility that all the things get done. It is not your responsibility to do all the things. And to elaborate on that, if that sounds a little weird, is your responsibility, for example, to make sure that the group has 8 people for the next raid tier, right? It is your responsibility to make sure that you're in a situation where you're able to tackle progression when the new content comes out. It is not your responsibility to find all 8 members. You can divvy that responsibility across your group as you see fit, right? You might say like, oh, our monk knows a lot of people in the hardcore raid scene, so maybe I can leave it to him to reach out to all the different raid members. Or, hey, another responsibility is like shot calling in game, right? Like, hey, our bard, she's a really, really good bard, and she's really good at mechanics and very, very clear, expressive person. I will let her shot call in game because she's better than me, and I can focus on my own role, right? Now, the shot calling example, that one's actually pretty common. People generally leave shot calling to be a different person from the raid lead, right? In-game captain and like management raid lead are usually thought of as 2 different roles. So people do actually divvy up responsibility a bit. But my point is, you can go further, right? Like, if you can't do scheduling, let someone else do scheduling. If you can't do whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can't do something, let someone else do it. It's your responsibility to just make sure, say, hey, scheduling isn't getting done. I let that person try to do scheduling, but he hasn't done it. I need to take over and see what's up. I need to ping them, prod them to do it. And if they don't do it, then I have to take over and do it, or give it to a different person and remove the responsibility. So like I said, it is your responsibility that things get done. It's not your responsibility to do things. And that's basically summarizing this tip. And tip number 5, balance your decision making. And so this one, I had a lot of trouble with this one because this one I struggle to find the best right answer. But to summarize what I mean here is that sometimes you will be the deciding voice. Sometimes you will be the person who says, we are doing this, that's final. It doesn't really matter what the group says, like, I've decided we are doing this. So, for example, for my group, that's like, I've decided that we are doing 9 hours of prep every week before Savage, starting a month before Savage comes out, so that we can prepare and practice, difficult content. That's not something we vote on. I just decided it because it follows our group's goals. Like I said, goals inform your decisions. So our group's goals are to clear quickly. Therefore, I decided this. That's final. Sometimes you will decide democratically. Sometimes you will have a vote. So a good example of this is trials, right? You'll say, we'll have a vote, we'll do a trial, and we'll have a vote as to whether or not we want this person in the group. And then you'll set some threshold. It doesn't have to be majority. It might be like you need 100% of the people to like the trial, to get the trial in the group. You can set any threshold, but you're deciding with a vote, right? Everybody's voice is equal. And sometimes what I really prefer is you do this mix. And what you do, and this requires really good communication to do this mix, is you talk to everybody individually. You say, like, I want to hear everybody's opinions. This is what we do for trials. I want to hear everybody's opinions on this trial. I want to hear what you thought was good, what you thought was bad. Just tell me everything that you thought about the trial. Just dump it. I don't care what your opinion is. I just want your opinion. And if they trust me enough, like we have a environment of open communication, they'll just dump whatever they think. And then I synthesize all of that, and then I make an informed decision based on what I've heard from everybody. So in reality, like, they're giving their input for the decision, but I make the decision. And when I make this decision, not everybody's going to agree with my decision, right? It's very unlikely that everybody agrees with the same thing. Or if everybody agrees with the same thing, then, you know, you're probably making that decision anyway. But most of the time, not everybody's going to agree. So what you do is when you make this decision, you say, I heard your feedback. I heard all these reasoning. However, I made this decision because I felt that XYZ was important, or X thing was more important than Y thing. Therefore, I did hear it. However, in this case, I decided that the best route was this. So by expressing yourself, in a very clear way, even if you go against the opinions of your raid members, they're more willing to accept your decision. And finally, a little tip here is you should be firm. And what I mean by this is that sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes, and I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, you just have to make a decision by yourself and say, like, no, we're not doing that. Like, I understand why you might want this, but no. Like, it doesn't align with their goals, for example. And be very, very, very careful with this. You want to use this super sparingly, like, to make, like, your executive decision of, like, overruling everybody else. This is something that you need to put a lot of thought and care into doing. So I can't think of a good example, but basically what I'm saying is, know that it's an option for you to make decisions on your own. Know that this is a very severe thing to do, and to use it extremely sparingly. I can't even think of, like, one time I used it in recent memory. But yeah. So that is about the end of the presentation. I do have some final notes here. Do not let these tips dominate your leading style. They're simply meant to guide. Everything in here is simply drawn from my personal experience, from what I've learned from making mistakes, from what I've observed from good leaders. But, you know, sometimes you will encounter a different problem with different people, with a different group, and it will require a different solution. Everything is really case by case when it comes to leadership. So sometimes you want to just throw out a tip. You'll develop your own leading style and say, like, oh yeah, that tip about decision making, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. And that's fine. Like, the whole point of this is to give a starting point for new raid leads to figure out what they want to do, to help them start to develop their own style, so they're not lost when they're just starting out. So if you want to do something different, go ahead. If it works for you, it works for you. In that same vein, I want to iterate that mistakes happen. If you know, you're not gonna be perfect. You're gonna make a mistake, and if a mistake does happen, when a mistake does happen, what I can say is just learn from your mistakes. Don't beat yourself up over making a mistake. Sometimes major things will happen. Sometimes your raid members will quit because you made such a huge mistake. Some similar stuff happened to me in the past. But the most you can hope for is that you can learn from that mistake to prevent it from happening again in the future. You know, we're all just everybody is just, nobody's perfect. We're all just kind of stumbling along and just, you know, just improving yourself on the way is the most you can ask for. And finally, I'm always willing to help out. If you do find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, I really don't know what to do, I'm feeling really stuck, I need somebody else's input, then I'm more than willing to help out. You can stop by my Twitch stream and just ask in chat. You can DM me on Twitter. You can leave a comment in the YouTube comment section for this video. You can contact me on Reddit, whatever. I'm going to leave my links to my social media in the description below. So whatever is really the most convenient for you, just contact me there. I would love to help you. And Similarly, if you found anything vague in this video, like if you want to ask for elaboration on a specific point, those same social media channels, just hit me up and I can elaborate. I can elaborate for you. So yeah, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you all found it informative, and if this type of information is valuable to people, I'm more than willing to keep making videos in this style, as I noted, maybe about communication or maybe about, say, what I think constitutes a good rater, stuff like that. And of course, I'm going to continue to make my design videos, so please subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you guys. Peace.